Okay, folks, I will call to order at 6:04 the December 2nd Silver Lake Regional School Committee meeting. We are being recorded. I will begin with any public participation. Okay, seeing none. We're going to pause for a moment. I'm going to turn the meeting over to our superintendent.
Thank you. So tonight, we have some celebratory cupcakes from our Silver Lake Culinary Department. We'd like to thank them. We're celebrating Attorney Duperay's retirement, which we are thrilled for him, but certainly we are going to miss him. On behalf of Silver Lake and Union 31, we would like to congratulate you on your retirement.
Thank you.
Your dedication, integrity, and work ethic are an inspiration to all of us. Your depth of knowledge is truly impressive and beyond comparison. You have always been a source of calm reassurance for us, even during a global pandemic. We would like to thank you for always telling us what we need to hear, not what we want to hear. And we will miss you, and we appreciate that you have blessed us in the capable hands of your son, Attorney Russell Duperay, and the entire Duperay team. We wish you a long and enjoyable retirement with love and gratitude from your Silver Lake friends.
And I want to thank all of you for permitting me to represent the school district. I not only consider the school district as a very valued client, but I've come to be friends, I believe, with many of you on the school committee and with administration. And so I truly will miss you all in my retirement.
Yes.
And but there comes a time where you do need to retire, and I'm at that point. So I will miss you all, and I appreciate your kind words and all the presents. I'm not even going to be able to carry them all to the car. But thank you.
Best wishes, Fred.
Thank you.
You know, Fred, I was trying to think of what to say. You captured it so well. And I said to my husband last night, I think I'm at a loss for words, and that shocked him. He like fell over. I had to pick him back up off the floor. But, you know, I remember you've helped us through things big and small, Handbook withdrawal, you know, monumental things, small things. But you really are part of the Silver Lake family. And as we always say to students that graduate and people that move on, once a Laker, always a Laker. So it holds true for you as well.
And I appreciate the T-shirt. So I'll wear that with pride.
Absolutely. Thank you. Okay, folks. Approval of minutes.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to approve the regular session minutes from October 21st, November 15th, and November 18th, 2021.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion on them? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to accept and hold the executive session minutes from our October 21st meeting, our November 8th meeting, and our November 23rd, 2001 meeting.
And you did say hold, right?
I did, for all three, please.
Yes, second. Thank you. Any discussion on them? Sure.
Just a technicality on the October 21st, it says 7. There's an extra 0 in the line, the second line of it.
Regular minutes or?
Executive session on the first page, the second line. I know which is correct, but I assume only one of those two numbers is correct.
Okay, I'll change it.
Yeah,
Thank you.
that was it.
I mean, I'll make a note of it for the next minutes. Because I don't think you can amend them once they've already been done. Is that correct? Can I make the change?
They can make a motion to amend.
Okay.
And it can be amended.
Okay.
What's correct, 7?
7 or 7D? That's the
Like, is it
question.
7-0 or 7 the correct number?
70.
Individual 7.
Just a number 7 and then the letter D.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
I'll second your.
Yeah, so I make a motion to change the 7-0
Okay.
to just a 7.
7.
think it's supposed to be 7D.
Yeah.
Well,
Correct.
and to keep the D there, though, yes.
Yeah.
Just change the number, the numeric portion of that.
Okay. All right. All those in favor as amended?
Aye.
Thank you. All righty. Let's go.
Good evening. I'm going to try to speed through my notes, and then I do have to dip out to go get into my costume for tonight's play. I tried to be like Mr. Kelly and Mr. Mulcahy, my predecessors, who, always made a cameo in some of the plays. They just had to walk on stage and smile. Somehow I got roped into lines, a costume change, and choreography. So
Oh, my goodness.
this might be a first and last for me. We'll see how tonight goes. So kicking off with some fall sports recognition this evening, I'd like to recognize two of our students, Summer Bejarano and Samantha Faherty, who competed at the state cross-country championship. Out of hundreds of competitors, they finished 111th and 67th, respectively, which is a pretty amazing feat at that level. Our girls soccer team had a historic season, making it to the state championship game for Division II. Our cheerleading team qualified for the state competition. They placed 3rd overall and have a bid to nationals. I was able to watch the routines before theirs, and in my opinion, theirs was flawless, so they did a great job. I'd like to thank all of our fall coaches and athletes. You can find a copy of all the fall awards that were presented at the Fall Awards Banquet posted on our athletic website. I would encourage you to check that out and just see the accomplishments of our athletes both on and off the field as they're celebrated. I wanted to make you aware that due to low numbers at both our school and Whitman Regional High School, we have requested approval from the MIAA to become a cooperative swim team for the 2021-2022 swim season. The MIAA did approve this request for us. We currently have a cooperative girls hockey team with Whitman Hanson, and we have a cooperative gymnastics team with Pembroke. It actually is a cost savings to our district because we'll split the cost of full-time, but it allows us to field a complete team because numbers were low for both schools.
Is that unusual for this particular team, Michaela?
It is, but I think we're seeing the low dip in numbers after the pandemic, and as the program builds, hopefully we'll recruit some more, more swimmers will try out for the team, and we'll see the program grow again. So, but this is a way to maintain our competitiveness in our league. So, yep. I did ask Karen to share a handbook update with the committee. It's just an update to our dress code, which we sort of revamped a little bit over the summer to make it more gender inclusive. Our school council then reviewed it and wanted to actually make it a little less restrictive. The biggest change is that hats and hoods would no longer be prohibited. Certainly within their own classrooms, teachers could ask students to still take them off, and we would still encourage and sort of teach like in assemblies and things like that, special presentations. We would encourage that. But it's really designed to be more inclusive and not gender specific, so it's not just focusing on the female's articles of clothing, but making it more broad. Because our handbook is digital, with your approval, we would be able to update it right away. We wouldn't have to wait for next school year. And maybe that would be a nice holiday gift for our students next week.
I have a couple questions.
Go ahead, Sally. After you.
Okay. I wish we had a copy of the one that we have right now in front of us, just so we could see the change. So there's like weird tiny print in the middle. Is that new, or has that always been there?
That's what was recommended by the attorney to include, and I just didn't change the font on it.
So that's in addition to what we already have.
That is what we currently have in our handbook.
Okay.
Yep.
Oh, so this is already in the handbook? This tiny print is already in the handbook?
Yep. Yes.
Okay, can I ask a really maybe kind of bizarre question? Maybe it's not bizarre, but it just seems vague to me. What constitutes as hate speech? Like, is that something that is interpreted by administration, or is there like a defined hate speech? Because from what I'm seeing, all this other stuff looks like it would fall under that category, like vulgarity, slurs, derogatory images. Like, that's not okay, totally. But what is hate speech? So what I could think is hate speech.
Yeah, anything
different than
targeted
you.
towards a protected group of individuals.
Okay. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah, you bet. It's a good question.
Do you have any other questions, though?
No, I was just curious.
Jason?
So I think I heard you say, but I just wanted to clarify. This went through the School Improvement Council process and was reviewed at that level?
Our school council, yeah.
Okay.
Yep, and there's input from the SLEA as well. So there was a teacher survey about it. So sort of all groups came together to propose this.
And the attorney was Kim Roach.
Yes,
Come on up.
we got a thumbs up from the attorney.
And can I ask one question? And maybe it's covered by not causing a disruption or anything like that, but physical coverage of the body. Like it doesn't say anything specific about having appropriate coverage. Is that kind of classified under the not being disruptive or?
Yep, disruptive, and then also health and safety.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was wondering about myself,
Yeah.
actually.
Any further discussion on it?
I would just say, like, as a former teacher, I think this is fantastic, and I think it's going to allow educators to focus on positive relationship building with students as opposed to constantly asking kids to take their hood off or pull their shirt down, pull their pants up. And I think especially coming out of the pandemic, when some of those relationships didn't have the opportunity to flourish the way they usually would, that this is perfect timing for it.
I would agree.
Any other comments?
Do you make a motion to approve the revised dress code proposal as drafted here?
I would second that.
Thank you.
Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor?
Great, thank you all. Also shared in your packet tonight is an updated admission policy for our CTE program. Just a couple of notes on behalf of Mr. Glass. All schools with Chapter 74 programs and admission policies were asked to write a new policy this fall, following a DESI-provided template. And these policies must now annually be approved by the school committee. So some things that are new and different. The entire policy has more detail than we were previously expected to have. The last policy was approved in 2011, and then DESI would review it as part of our CPR audit. Specific names are now listed in the admissions for McKinney-Vento liaison, our CTE office staff, our district administration, and there's also an appeals contact, which would be the principal. The criteria for evaluating candidates we can now no longer use minor disciplinary infractions against students, only suspensions. Safety and health replaces the word discipline now. And we will no longer use interview as a scoring component because it can be seen as subjective. However, we will still be able to have those interviews just to sort of meet the students, hear their interests, and talk about goal setting. Specifics to scoring is updated and is in much more detail than previously outlined in the policy. And then it also includes links for the school website, state regulations, and Mass General Law. So DESI is going to ask for school committee approval, followed by a signed letter from Dr. Prue, and then that would be sent to the Department of Ed. If there are no questions, I'll move on to school and staff updates.
Do you want
Need a motion?
Do you want a motion tonight?
Well, I think you have to, well, you have to read the whole thing first, right?
What's that?
They would have to read the whole thing first and then,
Well, if
It
it's
was
in their
sent to-
packet.
this was
they
in-
may
yeah,
have-
great,
we
go
sent
for
it to
it.
us.
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect.
Motion to approve the Silver Lake Regional High School Career and Technical Education Program Admission Policy.
Second.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. All right, lastly, some updates from our school. We recently delivered $11,046 to Dana-Farber as part of our October BCA campaign. That is our largest donation to date. I'm not gonna lie, I thought we were only gonna have just a couple grand to donate this year, but it's the biggest one that we've ever had. So I'm really proud of our staff and our students in our community for really stepping it up in the donation. We are excited to welcome back therapy dogs to Silver Lake. We've once again partnered with Dog Bones, which is a nonprofit organization out of Situate, Mass. So we have weekly visits now from the most adorable little pups who come in. Teachers can sign up to have them come in for short visits into their classes. Students aren't required to if they're either, allergic or fearful of dogs, although these dogs are not to be feared at all. But it's been a great experience for our staff and for our students. You know, I can't tell you how many students have come up to me in the last couple of weeks just commenting on how much of a stress relief it has been for them. So I'd like to thank two of our guidance counselors, Andrea Cranshaw and Tracy Ryan, who have really done the work to get this program up and running. We have more handlers have already reached out to us hearing about our school and have offered to come in, so we're hoping that we can have more frequent visits than just once a week. So. And then lastly, last Monday, 10 students of ours in CTE participated in the Skills USA Leadership Conference in Marlborough. They had the choice to participate in a community engagement project or skills focused training. The students that participated in the community engagement project built picnic tables for the Hopkinton YMCA. And those who did the community engagement created a 90-second video with their group that had to meet specific criteria with only 90 minutes using only their phones. Students Lily Beauchesne and Kylie O'Brien were part of a group that created a video and they won first place. Students who participated in the skills focusing training were tasked with creating a visual presentation on like a trifold board in 3 different categories. Students Erica Drolette and Brianna Duggan were in a group that placed second. Evelyn Moore was in a group that placed second, and Sean Belkunis was in a group that placed third. So we're really proud of our students, and this program is continuing to grow, and it's great to see our CTE students making their mark in Skills USA competitions. And that is all for tonight. I'm gonna go kick off my Sunday shoes.
Break a leg.
Loose.
Break a leg.
Thank you.
Do you want to introduce the student representative?
Sure, absolutely. So Catherine Arnold is our student rep tonight. She is a freshman here at the high school, and we're thrilled that she's jumped right into getting involved with student council. She does have a couple of highlights to share right from student council, so I'm going to turn it over to her if that's okay, and then Mr. DePiel, it's all yours.
Yeah.
All right. Good luck with your work. Thank you.
Good night. Thanks, Michaela.
Fred, thank you for everything.
All right, so throughout November, we did a bunch of fun activities. The junior and senior girls had the opportunity to play in a female flag football game against Pembroke. It was at Pembroke. We sadly lost the game, but a bunch of donations were made to Toys for Tots. It was a very successful event. We hosted Laker Day, and it consisted of school-wide bingo where prizes were given out to a bunch of winners, a hypnotist show where students got involved in front of their school, and a pep rally where we played lots of class competitions and prizes were handed out. In December, we are planning to have a student versus faculty basketball game on December 23rd, and it's going to raise funds for the Plymouth County Coalition for the Homeless. That's about it.
Awesome.
Very good.
Nice job.
Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine.
Have a wonderful holiday.
Thank you.
All yours.
All right, here we go. So the first is I'd like to welcome Jessica Kennedy. She's our new .5 adjustment counselor at the middle school. She's joining us from Archbishop Williams High School, where she served as an adjustment counselor since 2015. While at Archbishop, she created mental health wellness curriculum focused on bullying, depression, and suicide, stress management, social media, addiction, and self-exploration. She also supported community building, advising SAD, diversity, and fashion clubs. And she's a great addition to our staff. So I'm just saying welcome to Jessica. She has started just recently, and she's our new staff member. So on to the Turkey Bowl. So our annual Turkey Bowl, I'll say it right out. So the teachers won the annual Turkey Bowl this year, so 42-21. I still went out there and played, so we'll see how many more years I have left, but I was out there. But in all honesty, we had over 500 students outside enjoying the day. This is the short day, the Wednesday before Thanksgiving break. Some watching the game, some talking to friends, other talking to teachers. And, you know, as you look around, it's not only the moments on the field, but it's really what's happening all around during that day, and that sharing of that day amongst our students and our teachers and our staff. That was kind of a powerful moment. And what made me think about it in that sense is that when the day was over, you know, you finally go back to your office and you get your messages from your phone, and you get, you know, calls that you're calling back, and you're talking to the parents, and when they say, hey, you know, so-and-so came home today, said what a wonderful day they had, it was so much fun, enjoying, they had popcorn, they were doing this, they were talking to so-and-so, you know, and I had 3 parents that made sure they let me know that their child came home and talked about that day. And that's powerful. That's what you want. When you have an event, you want them to take that home and share that with their family. So I just want to thank all of our students, student council, our staff for having a great day, and for our community and our kids partaking in that. Out-of-state field trip. So we have a out-of-state field trip that's coming up at the end of the year, Canopy Lake Park. Students will participate in a team building day at Canopy Lake Park. I was looking for permission, because it's out of state, to bring it here and see if you get a yes vote.
Motion to approve the out-of-state field trip to Canopy Lake Park.
Second.
Thank you.
Any other discussion?
Just as an addition, the security and the family-owned nature of Canopy Lake Park definitely makes me feel comfortable sending our children there. They're wonderful to work with. I've had some experience with them as well, and have no problems allowing our students to go out of state to attend that field trip.
I'm just curious, is it like a 7th grade trip, an 8th grade trip? Anybody can go? You sign up, all students go? I just don't know much about it.
Yep, so this particular trip is for a team that does it at the end of the year. Each team has different events based on student interest, and they have different team building towards the end of the year. We do have a music trip that does go to Canopy Lake Park, and that happens annually, and that's for all students that are in chorus and band. I haven't brought that to us yet this year because of COVID, so they're still trying to figure that out a little bit in regards to music and singing and playing, and so I apologize for that. But that has been here and part of our middle school for the 11 years I've been here, but COVID has certainly impacted a little bit of that. But so there is an opportunity for all students to go to Canopy Lake Park too. So.
All those in favor?
Aye.
So the next thing on the list is the Cape Cod Educational Mini Grant for $500. We were awarded. It's to support our positive behavioral intervention program here, which is for incentives promoting positive behaviors from our students around our school. And this was granted from Dorothy Severis, who's the chair of Cape Cod 5, and I would ask permission to accept the grant, support the school.
Motion to accept.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Gordon, was that you that seconded?
Jason.
Oh, Jason, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Or you. It happened.
Yeah.
All at the same time.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, and I will send out a thank you to Cape Cod for supporting our programs.
Excellent. And that covers all your school updates too, Jim?
I got a few more, but I can go.
Oh, okay. I apologize. I thought you were ending your discussion.
Oh, don't cut me off.
I'm coming.
I got the hook. So I'll quickly just mention a few things that we're doing during the holiday season, and that's we have the Holiday Head Start party that's coming up this year. You know, to make an adjustment, we used to have people in our building and would go down in the cafeteria. Would have families here, but this year, you know, for safety reasons, we are going to the Head Start program, and we're going to go there. We're going to go with cookies, carolers, Santas, and a gift for every student. They have 70 students there, ages 2 to 5, and we're very excited to support and continue to support the Head Start program, even though a couple of adjustments being made. But we're excited to bring our holiday cookies and our carolers and our Santa to them and our gifts. So that will be happening on December 22nd. We have our Toys for Tot program, and that will be starting on December 7th, where students come in and donate toys to participate in the Jingle Ball Tournament. We also did our team t-shirts this year a little bit differently, where we took our art classes and we did t-shirt designs, and the teams voted on their t-shirt designs and their team mantra, and that got put on the t-shirt. And I also want to thank Specialties Ruth Finn for her help. She's the owner of Specialties, to support our school in such a way, and they came in at school, and the students have them. We also have Coats for Kids coming up. That's being headed by SMAD. where we collect coats for the needy, and we bring them to Anton's Cleaners, and they redistribute those for students in need. Student Council is doing our stockings for soldiers, and that's coming up on December 7th to the 16th. We'll be donating to soldiers overseas and that are based in Qatar, and they'll be doing non-perishable items, letters of appreciation from our students, holiday cards, and we're very excited about that.
May I ask you a question about that?
Yeah,
Are you
sure.
taking donations for that, or are students kind of controlling that donation flow?
So the students are, but the students are bringing in donations for that, so yeah.
Okay.
But if someone would like to donate to the main office, I can certainly get it over to Student Council. So any and all, this will be in my parent updates as well coming
Okay,
up.
great.
So parents will have access to that.
Can you tell me the dates one more time for that? I'm sorry.
Absolutely, December 7th to the 16th.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So we also have our annual giving tree. So once again, we'll do our giving tree where teachers come in and bring in gift cards from stores such as Target, Walmart, Old Navy, or a cash donation. And through this program, the staff's generosity is overwhelming, where they give these cards to the needy students from our own school. And we've been doing this for 8 years now, and very appreciative of their generosity. Our food drive happened right before Thanksgiving, where we, coordinated by Student Council, we donated over 500 food items to the shelters. So I want to thank Student Council for organizing that. And winter concerts are coming up December 14th, so if you want to come see our band or our chorus students, December 14th. And then we have basketball tryouts coming up also on the 14th, 15th, 16th for the middle school. And our first game will be January 5th. And finally, was the week after Christmas, which is our holiday play. We'll be taking back the stage. I'm very excited about that on December 11th and 12th. And very excited. I've seen the kids here till 5 o'clock trying to get ready for it. It's great to have it back. The stage is back, drama is back, and it'll be a wonderful show for people to see. So I'll leave it at
And
that.
what show are they doing?
So it's towards the week after Christmas, so it's
That
Santa's,
is actually the name of it, okay.
it's actually the name of it. They say Santa's workshop is exhausted. Dickens and Weatherby, the storytellers, they describe how they all take a vacation to get away from each other after Christmas. They all end up on the same island. And that's where the fun begins. So it should be a very entertaining story.
Great.
So thank you, guys.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks. Okay, Christine, financial report.
Thank you. But tonight I have brought in just a handful of warrants. The meeting was still off cycle from traditional warrant time frame. So next week we will be electronically sending the warrants out to signatures. So tonight I brought a few things that are timely, and I just wanted to make sure I took care of those. So if there are any questions, please let me know. Other than that, I brought...
If there's any more around the table, send them down.
Thank you.
In your package tonight, there is a copy of the financial. As I've tried to say before, this is just a snapshot of a moment in time, and right now what we do know. There are a handful of deficits, all of which I did speak about last month, but there's one I wanted to bring to your attention that is on page 6 of the detail. This is transportation for special education at the middle school and the high school. So that's specialized transportation. And last month, Summer said to me, is that the number? Will it change? And I said, we're all set because we've been coming for everything. Well, since then, 2 of our vendors have dropped out of transporting students. So we had to seek additional vendors, and it's costing us more money. So that deficit has grown from 5,000 to 8,000, 13,000.
Do we have a contract with these vendors?
The vendors that we use, especially transportation, does not require that you do a bidding process. So it's per route. So each and every route, because all the routes are different. Right? So we actually do it per route is how we end up doing it. And these 2 companies just were no longer able to financially stay viable. So they dropped out of business, and we had to find other vendors. So now we're digging deeper into that hole, and they're not necessarily as close by. And one of our reliable vendors, they decided to retire at the end of June, so we knew they were gone. But this is taking 2 more vendors out of the mix for us, so it's adding some challenges. So I did want to add that, Summer, that
Maybe I had like Spidey sense.
I know, as of that moment in time, that's what I knew, but it did change. And so I just wanted to bring that to your attention.
Maybe next time it'll be a better Spidey sense.
That would be okay. And that was all for the financial, so because nothing else has really changed. That was a big change in the financial. I did want, especially since you asked me the question last month, and I was so sure of myself.
Well, thank you for clarifying.
One other thing I did want to mention, it was brought to my attention yesterday that Kingston, the town of Kingston has set their meeting date for the spring, and they've set it for April 9th. So that's a real concern for us because our budget, per our regional agreement, must be submitted to them 45 days prior to that, which means that our budget would need to be voted and submitted to them by February vacation. So I did call to confirm, and they said, oh yes, we didn't think it'd be a problem. I said, well, it's a problem for us.
Yeah.
So I did send a copy of the regional agreement so they could see it in writing. I have not heard anything back yet, but I did want to bring that to everybody's attention that that could alter our.
They always have their town meeting in April though, don't they? But not that early? Oh, I thought they were vacation.
So we would normally approve our budget in our meeting in March. That gives us plenty of time for 3 towns. But this is.
We would barely have the ink dry on House 1, the governor's budget at that point. I mean, we would have no idea what the Senate and the House would be planning to do with Chapter 70 funds, Chapter 74 funds, and
Yeah.
For some reason, Kingston had their town meeting in April. I don't know why I thought that, but.
I think they may have had some pieces in the past, but it's been non-financial matters. They've been, So they've had separate dates.
okay.
They've had
That's what
some
I'm thinking.
language changes and things like that. But this is the first time that I've heard that where they're having their town meeting April 9th, and that impacts our schedule.
Yeah, that's,
Can we go before the Board of Selectmen and request that they reconsider the date, or is it already like a?
They voted at Tuesday's select board meeting. So that's the information I think we could.
They could change it, their prerogative. It's just a matter of if we give them a budget before that, it's a pretty loose budget.
Right.
Like Jason said, we won't have health insurance in it. We won't
Right.
have the state numbers. So
it,
it's like,
it would
okay.
it would be a waste of money on behalf of the town of Kingston and a waste of time on behalf of the members of the community who show up to vote on that budget.
Won't be very accurate.
Most
I agree.
likely, we would have to ask them to reconvene to address an amended budget later.
Correct.
Which would incur a financial cost and the time of the residents of the community.
Yeah, it's their decision, though, not ours.
I would imagine they could change the date. It's not
Oh,
like you
yeah.
have anything printed. You haven't spent any money on it.
Do you think it'd be appropriate for you as the chair to perhaps reach out to the Board of Selectmen and ask to be on their agenda and ask them to reconsider?
Let's wait and see. It may need to be a Kingston person as well.
Oh,
So,
I think-
I'm happy to help.
but,
Yeah, I think FinCom would recognize it.
yeah,
They have enough experience there to say, hey, we're not going to get our job done at
yeah,
FinCom
yeah,
to really go through. Unless somehow our first run of budget is
Yeah.
pinpoint on what they need,
yeah,
it's not going
yeah.
to.
No, I agree. I agree with you.
I would
Yeah,
imagine
let's-
once they know, I think it was more oversight, once they understood the implications,
Right.
they would reconsider,
When I
give plenty of
called
time.
the town administrator's office, they said, oh, we weren't sure, we didn't think it'd be a problem. So
Yeah.
I sent the regional agreement
Yeah.
saying, and with that date will be the February vacation week that our budget would need to be done. And Jason made a good point that our February meeting is when we have the governance numbers come the third week of January. So this is the first presentation of our budget with the assessments based on the governor's numbers. So we traditionally don't vote our budget until March, after we've had a chance to review that.
Even then, sometimes it takes a couple of meetings a month
I
to
know.
get there, so.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I just want to make sure I brought that to everybody's attention.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you did.
Well, actually, Chris is the one that gave me the first call on it.
Sorry.
Oh, no, better to find out now.
Yeah, no,
If I
no.
can do
No, in
something.
February.
So that's it, unless there are any questions for me. No? Thank you.
Thank you,
Okay.
Chris.
Assistant Superintendent?
Thank you. Just have an update on our curriculum assessment and instruction for the past month. So as you know, November 2nd was our district-wide professional development day. So came on the heels of, it was a Tuesday after we had the Wednesday, Thursday, Friday off. So it was sort of a herky-jerky time, but people came ready to learn about EduPlanet 21, which is our curriculum mapping software. So at the secondary level, we started the day with a presentation by an EduPlanet consultant who was on site. Her name's Kelsey Jascott, and she talked about some best practices for other districts that have moved forward with an implementation. I appreciate the work of our coordinators and department heads who have took in-process curriculum units and learned the software prior to November 2nd, entered those units in there so that teachers in those departments had an opportunity to interact with work that they had already created. And then teachers work together in their departments or with their teams at the middle school to continue making progress towards our goal of having a standards-aligned and engaging curriculum for all students. And I'm sure staff say they would appreciate even more time to do that and have more opportunities to collaborate. And we agree that they could use more time to do that, but it's to take one of the in-school year professional development days and devote it to that, I think is critically important to get the momentum started with that. So we started the day with less than, I think, 40 units, and by the end, district-wide, we had over 340. Not completed, but I think just sort of a metric on having positive momentum to head in that direction. So that was a good start to accomplishing that goal and making sure people were confident in the Understanding by Design framework. And then at the end of the day, Mr. Dupiel and Principal Gill shared a brief overview of the goals for our student survey, the social emotional learning survey, so that staff had a sense of the purpose. And simply the purpose is during these times during the pandemic, to really check in with our students and making sure that we have a sense of what their needs are and also what their strengths are. So that information was shared with staff, and segue into an update about our survey at the secondary level. So we had great participation by our students. We had almost 90% of the high school and middle school students take our student survey, and next week our social emotional learning task force members will learn about how to interpret that data and to develop next steps based on what we find out. So we're excited to do that training next Friday, and then the goal would be to work with our full staff in January around next steps based on the needs and strengths identified from our survey. So it's a busy year, and we appreciate all the energy that staff put into not only supporting students, but also adding on new things and moving forward with new initiatives that are important. So those are two things that we've made progress with this month, and I think we're headed in a good direction.
Ryan, do you distribute do the students fill the survey out as part of a classroom activity, or are they doing it on their own from home?
It's a good question. So this survey is completely digital, and at the middle school level, based on their schedule with the time it's labeled SSR, which is sometimes silent sustained reading, but also times when they get support from teachers. That was completed by students at that portion of the day. The high school had their advisory schedule where a short block was inserted toward the middle of the day, and students had 20 minutes or so during that portion to complete it. If they're absent, we have a list of the students who didn't opt out and also were absent, and we're going to work on an opportunity for them to do that, but it was during the school day.
It's a wonderful approach because, just statistically, that's a fantastic survey body of information to be working with, so that's a great approach to get that sort of response.
I think thank you, and I think it's important when the first time you do it to make sure that you're really capturing everybody, and so I think that it was recommended that you could just send a link to families, but Jill and I have worked together and followed that model, and sometimes you get less than 2/3, and people say, wow, that's a tremendous return rate, you got 2/3 if you send it out that way. But I think this rate is, I agree, and I think teachers, my expectation would be there's a quick return on this because teachers have an opportunity to have information about what the students' strengths are in front of them and the needs. And so we're excited to be able to get the data back in the hands of the teachers. And I think all the teachers I know care tremendously about the students. And I think when they have information that helps them meet the students' needs, that they would be excited to move forward with that. So we're looking forward to that training and taking some next steps with that.
I have a couple of questions about the survey. Who has access to the data?
So right now, nobody has access to the data because it's anonymized based on student responses. So what I mean by that is when the survey was shared with all families, every single question was shared so people could read it. Nobody has access to any individual student response. So when there's a question in there that says, I don't know one off the top of my head, but one of them says, I have an adult like that I can go to get help on like schoolwork or something like that. No individual information is, that's all anonymized and on the platform.
So by that, just to clarify, like,
Sure.
It won't say, like, Johnny Smith does not have an adult that they can, Johnny Smith answered this question X, Y, or Z. It all goes into a pool, and it says, 90% of our students have situation Y or A. Okay, so
Yeah.
there's no identifying individualized marker,
that's correct.
barcode, or whatever for a kid.
That's correct, right. So that's number one about access. Then the areas that we assessed, given where we are, we assessed like supportive relationships, emotional regulation, social awareness, self-management, growth mindset. There's a series of, they're called scales in the survey. They're like areas of focus. So teachers of students would then have access to information about those scales, so like red, green, or yellow. So if a student, if it said like the student was green for supportive relationships, that would show like, well,
But how do you know the student though? I'm sorry to interrupt you. I'm getting lost because how would this teacher know the student is red, yellow, or green if you don't know what the student?
So all the data, so there's like 6 or 7 questions that point to a single, a single topic area. And so based on those 7 questions, then there's sort of a rating calculated for, like I said, supportive relationships, emotional regulation. So it would give both at the classroom level, but also at the school level, it would give you like a dashboard of what the strengths and needs of the students who responded would be. So you don't get the individual response to any question, but you get a sense of, based on the scale, what is a strength and what a need might be. And that's all.
But for the entire student body at Silver Lake though?
Right.
So, as a whole?
Correct.
So not Johnny Smith, it's overall as a district, we need to work on.
Correct.
We're in the yellow zone for this, and we're in the red zone for that.
Yeah, exactly. Any rostered group. So for example, though, like if you are an ELA teacher, you could see for all the students that are rostered to you, you could see.
What do you mean? What do you mean by that?
Like the students that you teach.
In aggregate without their names though.
Correct.
So if I'm teaching 50 ELA students, my roster is a total of 50 responses, and you're getting the dashboard based on those responses. Again, not at a specific student level.
So, but again, this is all fuzzy to me because I just asked the question and it's all Silver Lake. Now you're telling me it's down at the classroom.
Well, they can boil it down.
But how can you boil it down if you don't have a marker for each kid? How can you know that Johnny Smith is in Mrs. B's ELA classroom if you didn't identify Johnny Smith?
I'm happy to provide sample what this data looks like based on like the district level, maybe the school level, and the classroom level, so you can have a.
Well, how do you know where the kid is if they don't have any identifying information? How do you know that Johnny Smith is in Mrs. B's ELA classroom if you anonymously?
The platform knows. So
who knows
the
that?
admins on this side don't know. The platform knows.
Okay, so who has access to the platform then?
Well, we all like. I have access to it, but I don't. I have access to the platform.
It's the software.
Right. We have to set the survey, but I can't go in even as an administrative user, I have no access to any individualized student response.
It's based on metadata that the teacher sets up their classroom and says, this block of students is in the classroom. When it goes, you've got a mathematical identifier of the student that goes to the platform and groups them under a mathematical identifier associated with the classroom, and it accumulates the statistics and spits it back out as the classroom level. If you were to hack their system, you could almost certainly identify individual students. The school doesn't have that. The platform does.
Well, and every night, I mean, our Power School student information system also has all the information about the teachers that our students have and their student schedule, which also shares that with DESE, who tracks like student progress based on performance on state assessments. And so some of these systems, like Mr. Laws is talking about, there's an integration almost with all of our systems that would help it understand which kids have which teachers, so that a teacher will be able to look at the strengths and needs in these areas of the students that they work with. And that's the goal of it, is to help teachers understand what are the needs and strengths of the students that I have in front of me. So whether you're like a 4th grade teacher or you're a 10th grade teacher, you can think about, how do my students, in terms of growth mindset, how do they think about their performance, self-efficacy, grit, which is like, tenacity. And so then they can think about ways to take advantage of those strengths or adjust their instruction based on the needs of the students in front of them, which I don't think is tremendously different from how a teacher may look at their class, assess what their students' needs are. I think this gives them more reliable information. I think this is a year when we have a lot of anecdotal data about what kids need, about how kids are behaving and performing, and I think that students deserve and teachers deserve the most accurate data, which is every student who wanted to take it put in information about themselves individually, which then is protected, but also shared back with their teachers in a, I would think, more objective way than our sense. Like we're getting, when we came back, I think a lot of teachers were, I think it's a challenging time, and I think this is using a survey like this helps to more objectively think about student strengths and needs.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I would just add, like I don't think it's
No,
anything
I
new.
can see the benefit to it. I also just always am very cautious because I want to know who has access to this data, because once you start digging into the deeper levels of things like this, and I could be wrong, but it's my understanding that Harvard has access to this data because they're doing some kind of study across the state regarding to how kids are feeling and things like that. So when you start digging into these platforms and where they're sharing this information, I caution as a parent because I don't necessarily want this aggregate data that's so like I'm all for in-house surveys. I think that those personally are much more effective in my opinion, because I feel like we know our district best and we can then shape how we, all those things, the support systems that we're offering our students moving forward more in-house rather than it being statewide. I just get nervous when we give up this data to a platform that we're not really sure what they're going to do with it.
I understand. If you would like me to follow up about exactly who has access, I know that their senior research fellow, Dr. Hunter Gelbach, is associated with Harvard. This data is, as it was communicated to us, anonymized and confidential. I trust that, I think it's an absolutely valid concern. I mean, what's more important than the integrity of our student information system? I can follow up and ask about how is the data used, even if it's anonymized. I mean, I would just add that an important part of it, if it's a valid and reliable research-based survey, it does help us if there's national, one of the things that was attractive about this platform is that not only is it used in Massachusetts by many school districts, but there's nationally known data in there so that you can say, well, how does this compare to how every other, high school student reports who's taken the survey? So I think it's not, there's nothing individually identifiable in there, but I do think it helps that we have a nationally normed survey that other students across the country have taken, so we can see, is this truly a strength for us, or is this an area of need that is below other places? So I think that helps us a little bit, but I agree that I'm happy to follow up and say, tell us more about the ways in which our student data is protected, and I had 100% confidence when I talked to them, and that's a critical, everybody here, I think we're committed to that too, but just because it's that important, I'm happy to follow up and get more information about it.
Could we have Fred comment? I think a lot of this is actually the point of FERPA. This was how part of the concerns that led to FERPA were around big data gathering sorts of expeditions, and then how those were rolled up and what parental notification was required to participate in those and things like that. I'm just curious from what you're hearing there, is there a legal obligation of what the district is supposed to do in the notification of, say, parents? Did we fulfill that, and did we fulfill it, and I know where I work, all kinds of systems have to go through all kinds of FERPA sort of, we have to scale vendors on security risk based on FERPA level compliance and whether their systems can identify our students individually or not, things like that. So the vendor itself has to be vetted by, FERPA related standards, and then that sort of thing. So I'm curious just for an attorney take on that.
Yeah, I guess I don't know enough about this particular group to see whether they're private, state-sponsored, or what the origin of the group is, because I'm hearing it for the first time, just like yourself tonight. I know, for example, the state gets all kinds of information about student data. It's actually required that school districts submit it to DESE.
Yeah.
This particular group is a group from Harvard, you said? Or
they're based in Boston. It's called Panorama Education, but their statistical researcher is affiliated with Harvard.
Okay. So I guess the question is, data generally can be subject to disclosure under the public records law. This particular information, if it's generic in nature and can't be used to identify particular students, I don't think there's going to be a FERPA issue. But I don't know enough about, I'm hearing it for the first time tonight. It doesn't sound like particular students can be identified from the platform, and so it's generic data. Even a member of the public can get generic data about pupils, for example, the number of pupils in the class.
Right, and demographics.
Yeah,
and
demographic information.
That's all available.
So I'm not hearing anything that I think is going to be public records or a FERPA issue. But I'm willing to look at it a little bit more.
I would be surprised if there was. I just remember reading that the underlying groundwork of FERPA had to do with schools surveying students and then not necessarily fully reporting out where was the data going. Is it getting swept up into a national database? Is it part of an aggregated data set? Is it getting shared across the nation, even if anonymized? Is it being piped back into learning management systems? Is it like all those types of things? And that at a minimum, there was some kind of mechanism to require that. So I could be wrong, but I think that's some of what Summer's after, which I think is, a fair concern. It would shock me if a vendor with their sort of research capabilities and things like that were not, completely in line with FERPA and understanding it. But I think just for the administration's kind of transparency in how they report it and talk about it, we should be extremely clear on that.
Yeah, I don't want you to think that I'm coming across in any kind of accusatory nature, that I always think everyone has the best interest of our students at heart, and I don't think for a second we're trying to mine data from our kids and go sell it to the dark web or something weird like that. It's always something that I've always just been concerned about, is where is this going and who has access to it, and is it identifying? Because I'm still a little fuzzy on how it can't be identifying, but we can put kids in the same class and have a feel for the class. How do you know the kids in that class? But that maybe is a conversation we need to have outside of here, because I just am ignorant to
Be happy to
that
share.
topic. So yeah, maybe we can chat whatever offline sometime. Thank you. I appreciate you.
And I've had discussions with administration about that as well.
Yeah, we're excited to have some objective data about how our students are doing, what their needs might be, and we look forward to the training. We actually have one next Friday morning, so perhaps we could hear it from them as well and just get that reassurance that led us to them in the first place. But yeah, so that's the curriculum, instruction, and assessment update.
Ryan, I've just got a question back on that understanding by design stuff, and I probably should have asked it back then. So understanding by design, are we going to be using that somewhat like a learning management system? Will we be, say, administering formative assessments and things like that from it?
No, our hope would be that first it would be an opportunity, a place where teachers could collaborate. So at the elementary level, we had teachers from all of our towns collaborating on fourth grade math units and things like that. So first it would be a place where the units are built collaboratively, and then it would be an opportunity to look at, from the teacher standpoint, are we making sure that all of our teaching units align with the Massachusetts standards? So it would be it's a teacher-facing place for collaboration, and also to ensure that it aligns with the standards and also the high school vision of the graduate and other elements like that. So there's no assessment. It's really for teacher collaboration, and also ways for teachers to also look across departments at other curriculum. And lastly, it's also a professional development area. So it's very, I would say, teacher-facing. No student, I think, would ever know about EduPlanet 21, not because there's anything nefarious about it. It's just not. It's a teacher-facing tool.
No. Yeah, my questions are in this case are less about FERPA and student privacy rights and things like that. We do have a number of homework apps and things like that that students use, right? Just out of curiosity, does anybody within the district study the relationships between success on those and success on MCAS and things like that?
Homework apps?
Yeah, you got a lot of formative assessments. Theoretically, they're supposed to build up to mastery of something, which should translate to passing tests within class, which are also supposed to be at least somewhat predictive of the fact that you would do well in it.
So it's not a remind. You're talking about some of the software programs that we use to assess student progress.
Yes, exactly.
So there is a degree of that being done with Title I. Because it's a condition of the grant that we show how certain programs or staffing has led to progress in certain areas for students. I think that's probably the most clear-cut case. I think that we also have support teams that look at that data, particularly when students are struggling. They use that data to say, okay, here's some areas of need. What kind of things can we put in place to help the student and support them? But if I think of, we don't have someone who looks at all of our data and draws connections between different things. That's tends to be more building-based or program-based based upon the platforms that they're using.
And we haven't had anybody, and probably from the vendors, we haven't had anybody come in and say, here are the psychometric validations of what we're offering that show that these like work, so to speak. So what they're all going to say when they come in and make their sales pitch, what they all say is student grades improved by X, okay? But most of them are using extremely simple and even invalid sort of statistical means of saying that, and aren't validating. And I'm curious if we as a district study that at all.
I think we study it more so through our elementary platforms, less formally, but still being used at the secondary level, but primarily through support team. And then I'm trying to think if I'm forgetting other areas that we might use.
No, it does. We had this conversation last time when we talked about like common assessments and teachers being able to design them, and those being teacher developed. So
right, it's a similar but different discussion.
Yeah.
If you've got a common assessment, then it becomes very easy to do the studies. But if you're buying an off-the-shelf product that is a learning management system type of product, and they're supplying an off-the-shelf product of mathematical practice or something like that, sometimes, rarely, sometimes they will come in and say, this will improve student performance. Their claims behind that are generally very weak, in part because of FERPA protections that don't let them get a hold of the data. So it becomes very difficult to actually say for sure that the learning product we're purchasing is actually helping to improve or generate an outcome. That's what I'm interested in. And if you don't have like total answer to that, here tonight or something like that, I'm totally happy to talk about it with you separately. But from a learning standpoint, I think there's a lot we could do to evaluate. And we might be able to do it better than what the companies themselves can do, because in a lot of cases they can't get their hands on data that we could get our hands on. They can't verify that a student who's doing 75% all the time on their homework is actually passing MCAS, but we could do that.
Just going back to the FERPA discussion for a minute, there is an exception under the FERPA law where you employ specialists to review information in order to improve the program. It's routinely done in special education, where a specialist will come in, they will see how you're handling your team meetings. They will examine IEPs and the content of IEPs to see if they're written correctly. They will look at the team meeting process. So there are some exceptions to FERPA where specialists can actually come in and review fairly specific data.
Right. Well, so when it comes to like test data, especially theoretically, we should be able to do that. That's the whole point of sharing data back like that, is to be able to look at the efficacy of the programs that we're actually doing. So I wouldn't expect that there'd be any issue that way.
No, I was kind of reverting back to the earlier topic.
Social emotional.
Yeah, the earlier topic. Right.
I think I could just summarize by saying secondary, no. Elementary, there's an opportunity. There's a steep drop off after STAR, math, and STAR reading. I think we benchmark with those. I think there's potential there. But after that, like IXL, other pieces like that where students are practicing. So maybe there's an opportunity. We're not currently utilizing that in the ways in which you're suggesting, but there could be an opportunity to do that at the elementary level because of those off-the-shelf benchmarks is what I would say, just with my answer right now.
So, Gordon, just a couple of things I'll say is that I think some of what you're talking about is, like, for instance, we have Read 180, which is one of our reading remediation programs.
Yeah.
And it tracks progress over time for the students being in there, so that we can see that if we are effectively making progress for a remedial reading program. When we talk about MCAS, what we do is we look at the MCAS and we have to bring it back to our common assessments. So we look at the strands in the MCAS, see how we're doing, and then look at how the students are performing on those pieces of our common assessments for science, math, or ELA. And then we make those comparisons and evaluate what do we need more support on, what do we need to elaborate, and we take a harder look on it like that. When we do a program change, for instance, when we added tech engineering, we look at then our MCAS scores in science as a whole to see if they've improved over time when we're doing this programmatic change and adding staff or personnel, and then we report back. Like we reported back. So our science, when we did the tech for middle school, I think our science scores went up on MCAS as a whole somewhere around like 8 points, where we were running maybe like 1 or 2 points above the state average, which was inferior to what we were doing with math and ELA compared to the state average prior to adding the tech engineering program back, which was deleted a few years before I had come here. And then when we put that back in, we then were running double digits above the state average, which was similar to what our math and ELA were doing. And then we were one of the top 3 or 4 in the South Shore. So we do look at those things, but I mean, it's not, we haven't done it by homework or grade completion, which I think is one of the things that you're talking about.
Right.
But we have looked at it based on our common assessments, which are common across the grade level, and then we pull the strands out. And when we did our math, when we added our math lab to the 8th grade, we did the same look. Because when we looked at our 7th grade math scores and our 8th grade math scores, our 7th grade math scores were again, maybe like 7 or 8 points above what our 8th grade math scores. Same school, same climate, same culture, same community, same students that were coming through from 7th to 8th grade. And we did a longitudinal look, so you looked over year. And so then we came to the assumption that if we mimic what we did in the 7th grade, we might have similar results in the 8th grade. And when we made that change, and when we took another look at the MCAS scores, we saw similar results from the 7th grade to the 8th grade. So we do those things, but not to the level that you're talking about with homework completion or.
Right. Okay. So that's great, and I'm really happy that there's at least some level of analysis to that. You can, you know, we don't need to keep doing this. I mean, we've got lots of other agenda items to cover, but at some point, even if you could get on a number of these homework systems down to the item level and be able to assess them, you know, if you have the right sort of statistician, it's not that difficult, and it will help out in understanding the efficacy of the buy. Of what we're actually paying for.
It's a very interesting concept that you would expect that there would be a correlation. You would expect that there would be, you know, success in completing that would give you the, you know, the, as you indicated, the better grade, the better MCAS score, passing the class, etc. It's a very interesting discussion, to be honest with you. Leslie?
Yeah, I think, Gordon, you'd want to do that before you adopt the platform, and you're seriously not going to get that data from the companies. So there almost seems to be like a need for consumer reports of like determining your app systems that's completely independent of the use. I'm just saying, like.
No, you're totally right. It's just we just had a budget presentation, you know, in our last meeting, looking at, you know, systems that we use and things like that. And these are, you know, $100,000 systems, and we have that data now to evaluate the efficacy. And look, part of the reason I raise it is in the high stakes field of testing, to put, so if you're making like SAT questions, you put those out in the field, the raw questions that go out in the field, 40% of those fail. They're not psychometrically valid, and they're not shown to be valid for you know, having assessed true knowledge. So if you have a 40% fail rate in a high stakes level, I guarantee you the stuff that is not in homework is not subject to the same rigor. Like those items cost $200 to get all the way to a point where they can be used by a student. The publishers are paying somewhere between $6 and $30 for the questions that are in the homework system. So the success rate of those questions and how they actually, you know, predict and measure learning is not going to be nearly as high. And, you know, you're not going to get any perfect system, but it would be really nice to know what you're actually paying for.
So there are some programs that have independent studies that measure effect sizes on different things that are independently done. And so that's part of the process that I know that some of these interventions that we're able to gather that data before we make a decision or purchase up front. We don't just rely on the information from the company. The other thing that I would emphasize is that the reason why we're going with a backwards design approach, with or without a software program to house it or to collaborate on it, is because we want to make sure that our curriculum is aligned with the state standards. And when we purchase a program, no matter how wonderful that program may be, it isn't necessarily tightly aligned with the Massachusetts state standards, because these publishers are often trying to appeal to
They start with Common Core and they build out from there and they customize by state.
So, and there are things that our teachers need to work together to define what's most important for students to know and be able to do. Because the name of the game for most students is not about coverage, but depth of understanding and transfer skills. So if you attempt to just teach to the test and cover it, the majority of students will not walk away with as much value that if a curriculum unit is intentionally designed, albeit supported by programs or books that are as closely aligned as we can get for our students. But there's no replacement for the actual designing of curriculum that goes beyond the textbook, for lack of a better expression. We have to get beyond the book. But the books are a great resource, but they're not the...
I agree. There's so much more stuff we could talk about. Too much on that.
I'll just, I guess, add to that in that you could look at that in terms of any learning support tool that you use. For instance, I remember when my daughter was in school, there was a particular way that one teacher wanted them to take notes. And come heck or high water, they were all taking notes in that way, and if they didn't turn their notes in that way, then they didn't get a grade on the notes, right? What if that particular tool didn't work for that child or another child, you know?
Yep.
So I don't think it's limited just to these apps. It's limited to anything that's applied in some factory method that may not apply for an individual student, and they need to be able to, you know, some are different types of learners. And so to apply a way that you're going to support something that is either rigid or doesn't have any efficacy is problematic.
Yep. Thanks.
Good discussion, Ryan. Thank you. It was meaty. It was good.
Better
It's
than
always good when we talk about
well-scheduled
teaching and learning and assessment.
Yes.
It's a good day.
Okay, on to me. My first item is test and stay.
No, now to a really complex one.
So in September, in your September packet, you received a memo from the Department of Education, and there were 3 flow charts related to test and stay program. I was asked to put this on the agenda for tonight. I'm going to give you some information from our vaccination rates. Let's see, our vaccination rates, the middle school and high school, and for students is 57.93, 67.11 for the high school. For staff, the middle school is at 93.9. For the high school, the staff is at 80.89, which brings the middle school overall average to 62.56 and the high school at 68.89. The cases in the state are in fact rising. The Department of Education announced today that it will be providing an online request system for mobile vaccination clinics. Now we have vaccination clinics on December 4th from 9 to 12, December 9th from 5 to 8, and December 18th from 9 to 12.
Can you say that one more time? Sorry.
Yep. KIS December 4th from 9 to 12, December 9th from 5 to 8, and December 18th from 9 to 12. Those are the upcoming vaccination clinics. The middle school has tested 19 students. The high school also has tested 19 students. That was the most up-to-date information in terms of how test and stay is going at the secondary level. We have fewer students who need to be tested at the secondary level than we do currently at least 2 of our elementary schools. We're vaccinated, cases are rising pretty quickly, which happened following Halloween, and then we anticipate another increase after Thanksgiving, and we expect a third increase after the winter holidays. So we anticipate that this will be probably a difficult time, especially at our elementary schools, for test and stay in terms of the number of students. We have asked for additional support staff from CIC, and we are, in terms of contact tracing, that is done with the nurses and the Board of Health, and the nurses solicit things like seating charts and information from teachers, but also from the students and families as well. So that's some updated information. I'm not sure what in particular people had in mind with regards to test and stay, but go ahead.
I asked for this on the agenda. And I don't know if this is a you question or a Fred question, but I'm unclear why we're unable to offer, so test and stay as it is currently offered, and I understand that it's how the state has presented it to us, is only eligible to students who have been exposed within the school. And so if a student is exposed by a sibling at home or by a parent at home, they are then out of school for the full quarantine, out of the classroom, provided very minimal amount of education support after a prolonged period that we had kids out of school. So what pathways do we have to offer to any student who is exposed, regardless of the location of their exposure? Like, just because the state says this is for this group of students, could we simply say we want to offer it to any student who has been exposed and we would like to allow that? Or are we, like, if they don't tell us we can't, then are we allowed to?
My understanding, and I'm not a lawyer, so my understanding is that test and stay is only for school close contacts. And the state, DESE, is not recognizing any other avenue for that to happen. I don't know the legality of that.
No, I agree with Jill. I mean, that's a prescription from the state, and it's not supposed to be expanded on. I mean, that is the criteria and the regulation of the state on that particular issue.
And
So
that's,
it's not open to local discretion.
and that is,
I mean, the program, test and stay, yes.
Whether or not we...
But if
could
you
we
do
offer our
test and
own
stay-
thing? If we called it, I don't know, test and come back. Can we offer our own program? Like, it just doesn't seem equitable from an education perspective that if Summer's exposed in a classroom and I'm exposed by my sibling, Summer's allowed to return to school tomorrow and test and stay, should she choose to, and elect to do that, and gets a full 10 days of education. But I'm not allowed to do that because I was exposed at home. It just doesn't seem like we're offering fair and equitable education here.
Yeah, I wouldn't dispute that. All I know is that you have to opt into the state test and stay program. If you opt in, then you have to follow their particular procedures and protocols. So some school districts don't have test and stay. Many school districts do have test and stay. But if you have test and stay, you have to follow, the protocols that are given to you by the state.
Now, are you implying that if we were to say we're not test and stay, we could make something more widespread, like Emily's proposing? Is that what you're suggesting?
I'm not suggesting that. No.
Go ahead, Jason.
So test and stay is fully funded by state funds. It doesn't come from our budget at all.
Right.
So in theory, we could use our own budget monies to do what you're talking about. Well, you can't use the state monies to do that.
But if we chose to go that path, could we do that? Could we create I mean, it just seems that we're going to have all, and I know it's short notice, it just seems so
I think it's cost
inequitable.
prohibitive to do it.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
That's why the state's funding it.
Yeah.
And I think that's also why they put such tight parameters on it, because they cannot simply afford to allow every district to, although I agree with the sentiment of it. Like, believe me, I just had a meeting with our elementary nurse about this, because I'm like, can you please explain this to me like I'm 4? Because this is like so complicated. We had like charts out and everything. But I guess to piggyback on something you had said, Emily, because I forgot the answer to this question. So let's use her scenario again. I'm exposed at school, I can do test and stay. If she's exposed at home and she provides a negative test, can she come back to school, or does she have to quarantine? I forget what the answer to that is.
It's 7 days. So I can test after 5 days, I can return after 7. So I've missed a minimum of 5 school days.
But even though we've both equally been exposed, because I was exposed at school, I can come back the next day.
You come back the next day, every single day, and you test every morning.
And that's what
So
she's
now
doing.
I see your point. Now I see
Like,
your
it just
point.
seems wildly inequitable. Like, I gotcha. We're treating the same two groups, like one group of students in 2 different ways.
So who says, I guess my question is, who says that she has to quarantine and take a test after day 5 and can return after 7 days? Can we say, if you can get a test that's negative, you can come back to school, Emily? Because you're paying for it, even though we're not. But what's the difference if she takes a CVS test or the bio test and stay test? What difference does it make?
I know that the state has control over the manner in which the test is administered, the training of the people who do the test, who's allowed to give the test, and also who observes the testing.
Right. And
So it's more controlled.
So maybe not the at-home one, but maybe like one that your physician can give you. That's fairly controlled. I'd say probably more so than the one that the state program is offering.
So when you accept the state program, you simultaneously accept their regulations and controls. That's the issue. So
Okay, so back to
they
what was
provide
suggested.
training. In some places, they've actually they supply, in many places, supply the personnel who are going to do the actual testing on site. There's a lot of money wrapped into this particular program. You have to apply to it, and when you apply to it, you accept all of their controls.
Do we have a contract with them, or can we unenroll at any time?
I believe you could unenroll at any time, but the problem will be is that then you would be responsible for
Test and stay at every school at our cost.
Oh, no.
We can go home.
Sorry?
We just go home.
people would just go home and quarantine
Yeah.
because we would.
Yeah.
Or
Oh,
But we
even if we
can't-
funded it ourselves, we
Yeah,
couldn't do
so
our own
it would
test and stay.
increase the number of students
Yeah,
coming
that's
to school.
The Test and Stay program has saved over 50,000 student days of learning since it's been started in September. I'm pretty sure that number is close to 100,000 at this point, but the last time I checked the data, we've saved 50,000 days where kids would be out of school with the Test and Stay program statewide. I understand your concern, but I don't want to throw the program we currently have out in pursuit of also trying to get our kids who were exposed outside of school back in quicker. I know the rationale for the Test and Stay program for kids exposed at school was because of the low transmission rates in schools since COVID started in comparison with COVID transmissions in the community, especially in households.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm not opposed to the program. I just feels like students are being treated differently based on, and especially I think if you think about some households, I mean, even outside of our district, in other districts where you have large groups of people in smaller spaces and things like that, it just seems very inequitable statewide that not every student is afforded the opportunity to remain in the classroom and have the same opportunity to get in-person learning.
Leslie, I'm going to just make one comment if I could before. I completely see what you're saying. The one difference I see is if you're being exposed at home, you may continuously be with that person and exposed, whereas in school, the student's been sent home and you're not getting that continued exposure. Leslie Ann?
So just to Emily and Summer's questions, Fred, maybe you don't know this, but you probably do because you're such a good lawyer, but In the terms and conditions of accepting this test and stay program, because I'm with Jason, I'm not throwing the baby out with the bathwater on this one, does it say that for those students that aren't part of our program have to follow that other CDC guidance on testing and staying home? Meaning that they don't have an exposure in the school. And is that part of the terms and conditions for accepting this program? I'm just asking because my next question is going to be, can we do something over and above the test and stay program?
It doesn't sound like we can.
I don't see how we can.
Yeah.
So they have a document, and the document has all the protocols in it, and you have to apply.
Sure.
And when you apply and you accept it, you accept all those terms as they're written. You don't add to the terms, you don't subtract from the terms. You accept the terms as they're submitted. And so changing the format so you have other students stay in the school who aren't part of the test and stay is going to violate the terms of that particular program.
Wait, say that last part one more time? I'm sorry.
It'll violate the terms of the particular grant or program.
Wait, but you're saying no, back it up one sentence more. Having students in the school.
The students that are quarantined at home and not part of the test and stay, if you allow them to go into the school, you're violating the test and stay.
Before the quarantine period.
Correct.
Okay, I got you.
So any person that was exposed, the only way they can stay in school is if they're part of this program.
We're conflating two things also.
Oh, no, but only if they were exposed in school, though. That's the thing, not...
Right.
We are subject to the guidelines and the flow chart regardless if we participate in test and stay.
Right, as far as...
What this is actually allowing is a more permissive way of allowing students to stay in school. If we didn't have test and stay, we can't create this above and beyond program because epidemiologists and medical professionals guided DESE through this process to come up with the best possible way to keep kids in school full-time.
Right, because otherwise they'd be out of school. It would just increase the number of students who would be out of school. And we have some small schools in our client base that haven't adopted or applied for test and stay. But the transmission rates are very low in those communities. They're somewhere in kind of in the hinterlands. And so it hasn't been too problematic. Whether it will become problematic because the rates are now increasing across the Commonwealth will be, an issue for them.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
The largest school
systems,
mid-sized or larger school systems, almost all of them, to my knowledge, have the test and stay. It's only the very small school systems that don't.
Thank you. So the second item was a letter to, again, a recommendation from a school committee member to put on our agenda this week whether or not we should send a letter to the Department of Education regarding unmasking and the 80% threshold that was set. I just wanted to note that if in fact the school were to reach 80%, does not mean that schools are then unmasking necessarily. That still would be a local. It's still, also we would have to submit that attestation to the state. It would have to be approved after the school committee and the Board of Health are in agreement that this is the way that we should go. So it's not an automatic that once you reach 80%, their masks are no longer required. So I wanted to point that out.
On vaccinated individuals.
Unvaccinated individuals, yes.
Oh, go ahead.
I just have a quick question. I assume it's not the Board of Health in the school in which the town in which the school sits. Is it the 3 boards of health?
It's Kingston.
It's just Kingston for these 2 schools. Yeah, okay.
It's not an option for the elementary schools right now.
Yeah, no, I just was curious about, because we're a regional district.
Arlington Elementary has 90% of their kids vaccinated.
Which one does?
Arlington.
Wow. Thanks. Go ahead.
Well, this one was also requested on here. I had a couple of questions that I didn't know if we wanted to ask Desi as a school committee. So one is like, what are the off-ramps are there besides 80% vaccination to unmasking this year, and what does Desi have in plans, and kind of inquiring about that. But the other was also, in the test and stay program, circling back for a second, if you have been exposed to COVID within the last 90, if you've had COVID within the last 90 days, you aren't even subject to this test and stay program as a close contact. So being exposed to COVID, it would seem, provides immunity. So I'm wondering
Testing positive, not being exposed.
Sorry, testing positive. Thank you for the clarification. So would a positive test result that showed I had COVID count in lieu of vaccination towards an 80% goal, if indeed it counts? If there's enough science to base it saying I don't need to quarantine if I had COVID, it would seem like I wouldn't need to, like, I just am unclear from Desi's perspective. It seems like they're the same rules should apply in both scenarios. Either you need to quarantine regardless of whether you've had COVID, or having COVID should count towards the same as being vaccinated. I don't understand.
So the exact wording to be exempt from testing and quarantine is an individual who has been previously diagnosed with COVID-19 and then becomes a close contact. So you're identified as a close contact. You would be exempt if that exposure occurred within 90 days of the onset of your own personal illness, and then you're recovered and you remain without COVID-19 symptoms. That's how they define it, as being exempt from testing and quarantining as a close contact.
If you're at natural immunity.
For 90 days.
Right, but I don't know how you
Science is just an abuse.
That's a rotating number then.
Yeah, how could you ever keep track of
But will booster shots be a rotating number? I mean, now places are doing booster shots. So to me, it doesn't seem any different than, and it's not a question for us to answer. I'm not a health expert. I wonder if this is something we should be asking Desi as they're putting benchmarks in front of us, clarification on what counts as meeting those benchmarks.
But to Emily's point, what is the off-ramp for all masks to come out? So the 80% marker is there for the vaccinated. I don't think anybody's articulated what the off-ramp is for all masks to come out.
I'm going to guess that it would be 100% vaccination. The way that this reads now,
Right.
yeah.
I'm not sure if I understand.
There's no other off-ramp right now.
No,
Right now,
that's what I'm
it's
saying. There's
80%.
no other off-ramp right now.
There's no other known offer.
All eggs in one basket.
So to Emily's point, shouldn't we be asking them what the off-ramp is? Because we're going to be in masks, these poor kids are going to be in masks for the rest of their lives if there's no end in sight here.
Well, I think one thing that we need to also remember is that until, I think it was a month ago, maybe 2 months ago, our youngest students did not have an opportunity to be vaccinated. So it is feasible. And again, I can't predict, and I'm not the commissioner, and I'm not the governor, and I'm not an epidemiologist, but it is possible that after people have had a period of time to choose whether or not they want to be vaccinated, and COVID cases begin to decline, you could see Desi come out with words like strongly recommend for people who are not vaccinated, as opposed to requiring the mask, like they had initially done at the end of last year. So I don't necessarily think that just because we haven't met the 80% means that we will forever have to wear masks, because I think this is, again, he said a date of January 15th, I believe, is the next point that they'll look at it, and I think that they will look at a number of different factors in determining how to move forward. But it was, and for the state, they had to recognize that there was a portion of our population in our schools that did not have a choice as to whether or not they could be vaccinated. And that's a relatively new development for our youngest students.
So I'm going to point out a potential problem you have with the letters. and I've seen some others in other school districts, is DESE will get a lot of, and the commissioner will get a lot of these letters from across the Commonwealth. The only time I've seen it's had any significant impact is if it goes through a statewide organization. So if the MASS or the MASC use their authority in the Commonwealth to get answers to the questions that you have, they have direct access to the commissioner. They have direct access to DESE. So previously, when we had this whole issue about discipline of students regarding that, and we couldn't get any answers from the Commonwealth on that particular issue, eventually we did get answers. The only reason we got answers is because Michael Long of the Mass Association of Superintendents of Schools, Stephen Finnegan of the Massachusetts Association of School Committees went to the commissioner. I got answers to the question, and I was working with them behind the scenes to get answers to those questions. But they rarely would give a response directly to a school committee. So you may be an exception, you may get a response, but I think you're not getting a response.
And I don't know that I think that we would get a response, but I feel like when we talked about sending a letter out to our families yesterday, as my 5-year refers to the past, a lot of people are like, they're not going to read it, it's not going to make a difference. But to me, it was the principle that DESE had asked us to disseminate information and to support the vaccination on our behalf, and I was strongly for sending the letter to our community in that capacity. But I also feel like it's our obligation to go the other direction and say we have a community that is struggling with the terms as they are being presented right now from DESE.
And I'm not saying you shouldn't send the letter. All I'm saying is to affect real change, you have to have groups that have the authority to get to the decision makers, to have influence on those decision makers.
See, what I've heard.
I've seen that in other situations too. And those are the two groups that have the most influence.
I was going to say, if only we knew somebody who was connected at MASC.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Fred.
Pardon me?
Do you want to finish, Fred?
Well, I know the people at MASC. I know Stephen Finnegan. I know all of those people. And I also know at MASS, Michael Long. And if there was, and I went to them on the discipline issue directly. So I spoke to them about that issue. What I'm saying is, if a group of schools had the same questions that are being unanswered by DESE, the way to get the answer is to go directly to the MASS and MASC as a group of schools looking for answers to particular questions. That is your best chance of getting an answer, as opposed to what might be somewhat symbolic gesture rather than actual change. To get actual change, you're going to have to get the people at MASS and MASC to help you.
Jason, did you mention at our last meeting doing the letter?
No.
No, okay.
But I was interested in this item, not for pro or anti-masking, because I know that we have a variety of beliefs on the committee itself about whether or not we should have our children masked. My concern is about, and it speaks to similar concerns that you brought up with the test and say versus what happens to kids at home, is dividing our student population and having some kids who can take their masks off when we hit this 80%, and then having another group of students who, for religious reasons, medical reasons, maybe family, personal reasons, have decided not to. I don't feel comfortable with having two classes of students when we approach this unmasking situation, if we ever get to the 80%. You know, regardless of how I feel about masking itself, it's this fallout that would occur if we did apply for the waiver once we hit 80% for our students who are not vaccinated, and will that cause almost a protected class to develop of kids who might be ostracized, feel peer pressure, feel ostracized from the greater community. We're talking about trying to rebuild community this year and make kids feel comfortable and safe in their schools. And I just don't see how the process that DESE has laid out for when we hit 80%, accomplishing those mental health and social emotional goals for our students. So I was happy to see this year for that reason. So we could talk about that concern I have for our students.
Thank you, Jason.
Okay. Are we, go ahead, Leslie.
I would just go back to our meeting that we had in August, the joint meeting, again, we had with all the school committees, where we discussed the exact opposite situation, where we didn't have a mask requirement, and we were discussing the concept that if a family chose to send their student into school with a mask on, that we would feel similarly, that that group of students would feel similarly ostracized and different, and all the other social and emotional issues. Clearly that seems to be a bigger issue in K-6 because, kids 7 through 12 may or may not pay attention to what their students say, their parents say. But, that's an equally interesting situation, right, where you're now unmasking, but you're saying, oh, families, but if you still want a mask, please go ahead. And you're like, but that's creating that sort of similar situation. So, I know we're on the other side of the moon on this right now, but I just want to point out we had that similar discussion back in August. And I would like to know what other, I guess the question really is, are there alternative off-ramps? Because we have an off-ramp right now. We might not like it. We might not like all the terms and conditions of it, but there is a very clear off-ramp for vaccinated individuals. So, I guess if your question is, are there alternative off-ramps that they're developing? It would be good to know. But, I wouldn't say, are there off-ramps? There is an off-ramp. It's right in front of us.
So at the BESE meeting, other off-ramps were discussed in public hearing, and one of them was looking at the CDC color chart for transmission at a county level. Obviously, if we see transmission rates drop below certain thresholds, there would be no need for continued masking regardless of vaccination status. And several members of the board have brought that up every single time they've renewed the commissioner's authority to continue the mask mandate. What are some of the other metrics we're looking at? What are some of the other off-ramps? They have been discussed in public session.
I think, though, to Emily's point, if I may, is, please tell me if I'm putting words in your mouth, is there's a difference between discussing them in public and is something under development, right?
Yeah, we're pretty far from 80% at this point, and I think it would behoove us to know if there are other off-ramps in the making that would give us the future.
Just with the data coming out from the state in the past 2 days and the county level reporting of December 1st for Cooperative, we're even further away from the CDC off-ramp than we would be from the 80% threshold currently.
Yeah.
It was looking good for a while.
Yeah, not looking good right now.
Getting worse.
Do we, what's the committee's, go ahead, Leslie.
Well, given Fred's advice and giving our trusty MASC member next to us here, do we ask our MASC rep to ask the question versus?
It sounds like it's already dialogue on it in these meetings. So, I guess, being present or zooming in on some of these open discussions would be the probably the most productive approach. The only other thing that you could do, and Michael Long, by the way, not Michael Long, but I'm trying to remember the guy for the MASC. Michael Long's the MASS.
Steve Fiddleman?
No, he's the attorney for the MASC, the executive director.
Glenn Kruchman.
Yeah, he's very approachable. I mean, you could pick up the phone and call him directly.
Yeah.
And he would tell you what he knows at this point in time. Their legal counsel is Stephen Finnegan. It's more difficult to get access to Stephen Finnegan, but he's one of the most knowledgeable school attorneys in Massachusetts. I mean, there's a reason why he's counsel for the MASC.
I mean,
He's about as old as me, too.
We've had Glenn, not recent years, but we've had Glenn attend Silver Lake School Committee meetings in the past as well, so.
But don't forget, I mean, you have entrusted me to be an MASC rep for your committee, but I've also been elected to be the Division III chair for several years. And now I am a member of the executive board of MASC.
Yeah,
I speak with Glenn on a daily basis. I'm having dinner with him next Wednesday night. I was just with him a few weeks ago. We were with the commissioner having some of these conversations as well, pushing some of the questions that have been asked, trying to find some answers.
I think you should pursue that route, and then report back, the information that you obtained in those conversations.
And the information I have given so far tonight is what I do know.
Right.
That they are looking at alternative off-ramps. One of them is the CDC criteria of cases per 100,000 by county, and the 80% at the current time. They are looking at alternative off-ramps. The board is becoming more and more adamant towards the commissioner every time he renews the mask mandate that he gives greater clarity to them as to what those off-ramps look like.
Yeah, so if you have a direct liaison, which you do, that's the most productive way to get the updates, to share issues and concerns. Because, Glenn Kuchar is one of the most influential people in the state, with the DESE. And so, I think you should continue that and report back. Timing is sport, because, things are getting worse rather than better. If anything happens, it might even tighten further, particularly with the new variants. So we're just going to have to wait and see. But every time you meet, I guess, keep bringing up the issue and see what the response is.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say that I was on that requested that this be on the agenda, but I also am cognizant of the fact that it's quite the process. It's, I do know it's not just, it's just going to come off, and I do understand we have to apply for this, so perhaps it's better to wait to have do a firm discussion and vote on whether or not we're even going to apply for the waiver until we are able to. Just because I put it on the agenda, I thought I just wanted to clarify that.
Oh, yeah, no, we couldn't even conceivably talk about a vote till we were at that threshold. Yeah.
I just felt really strongly about it, and Jason articulated it beautifully, better than I could, with less emotion. So thank you.
Any further discussion on this topic? Okay, seeing none. District update.
Okay, so your district update is going to be a series of student data for this evening that we generally have access to by this time of the school year. The first chart I'll direct your attention to is homeschool enrollment. At the top, you'll see homeschool enrollment for grades K through 6, but by each of the towns, which has declined since last year in each of our elementary schools, so you see those at the top. The second chart, which relates to grades 7 and 12, it's broken down by town. In grades 7 through 12, homeschool enrollment overall has increased by 7 students in Silver Lake. One of those students is Kingston, 6 of those students from Halifax, and Plimpton remains steady since last year at 3 students. So that's our homeschooling trend since last year. The second chart is Halifax, Kingston, Plimpton student enrollment grades K through 6. In Kingston, enrollment is up by 13 students. In Halifax, it's down by 5 students. And in Plimpton, it's up by 32 students. That's a big deal.
We are pursuing those fenced-off funds that were promised for enrollment growth.
So Halifax, Kingston, and Plimpton student enrollment for grades 7 through 12 is listed below by 12 by town. And you'll see here that Kingston has declined by 16. Yellow is Halifax has declined by 16. And then Plimpton, grade 7 through 12 is down by 22. And then the other piece of information that we like to provide you with in terms of trend data is our out-of-district vocational students. At the very top, you'll see the total number of students by grade enrolled in Norfolk, Bristol, or South Shore, the 2 agricultural schools and the South Shore Vocational Tech High School. 2 in grade 12, 1 in grade 11, 2 in grade 10, and 3 in, I think it's 3, my eyesight is terrible,
yeah.
3 in grade 9. And then if you go across, you can see by grade level what types of programs they're enrolling in, whether it's social voc tech, graphic design, computer technology, manufacturing and engineering, or one of the agricultural schools.
This is good. I don't know that I've ever seen what program they're enrolled in before. I actually like seeing that.
So at the very bottom, you'll see a notation that 4 students are in out-of-district vocational technical schools for Halifax, 5 Kingston students, and 1 Plimpton student. So that's the breakdown by town.
Are those directly back to the town? Fees for out-of-district placement?
What was the question?
Are the fees for out-of-district placement charged directly back to the town?
The individual towns maintain the budget for the tuition and transportation of those students.
Dr. Blue?
Yes.
The homeschooling, so I understand because of the pandemic and everything, we're like held harmless in terms of financial impact with homeschooling students, is that correct? Can you just speak a little bit to that, just because I think there's some confusion with, some people think that there's going to be this great impact, and I'm not sure we're going to see it right now, right? It's moving forward. See that impact financially?
That's,
or is that a very complex
it's hard
question?
to say because in part because they promised that they were going to hold some of these funds should students return. So I don't know what the impact or how that will be managed. So that's hard to predict. I guess anecdotally, you could say that some people who meet with success with homeschool might be more likely to stick with it and stay. So that could have a long-term effect. That perhaps some of these families may not have explored that avenue if not for the pandemic. So I guess that could also have a long-term effect. But it's hard to know. We can't give you the long-term impact because we've only got really two data points, last year and this year, to see where we're going with some of these things.
But typically, just one second, but typically, don't we submit our numbers by like October or something?
Yes.
And then, so we're still receiving funding for those children that are being homeschooled this year because they didn't. Am I not connecting these dots correctly?
We're receiving this year based on last year's enrollment information. So, so Jesse is actively looking at this. I listened to a webinar yesterday where they talked about they're still analyzing the information, and what they're seeing is that it's not as big of a dip or a change as they were expecting it to be. So they have set aside funds, but there has not been a final determination on how that will be allocated, to who will be allocated. So they're still reviewing that to see how significant of an issue it will be.
Okay.
but they're actively discussing it.
Okay, great, thank you.
And Madam Chair,
Sure.
quick legislative tidbit is there are some legislators currently looking to revoke held harmless from formula. It's not on the floor, it hasn't been put into any bill at this point, but there's talk.
To revoke, can you just elaborate?
So held harmless is seen as a regressive school funding formula because towns that no longer have the students are still getting the funds for those students. So there are some legislators who are currently trying to get those funds allocated to schools that actually have the greater need.
Okay, okay.
So that's something that I'm keeping a very close eye on right now. So held harmless might not be a thing someday.
Right, well, that's sort of where I was,
Right,
yeah,
yes.
okay. Always like to know what we're getting ourselves into. Thank you.
And that's it. Thank you.
I know it really has to be government.
School start time working group, I put that under new business so that we could start to have that on the agenda. Whenever you folks have an update, I'll move it from new business to old business on an ongoing basis. For the working group.
You're the chair.
Yeah.
Do that.
Oh, yeah, no, I just, so that you can update us as you progress.
Yes, thank you. So if you recall at the last meeting, we voted to move the school start subcommittee to a working group to allow us to have more flexibility to work with the other schools in the district, because if we were ever in the future to come up with a solution, if we identified that there was a problem that needed a solution, I should say, that it would need to be a district solution. And I think we're still at the revisiting whether there is an issue that we want to contend with and what the feeling is on the committees and in the communities, clearly. So Emily and I haven't started actively working on this, but I don't know how you feel, but I would like to get the opportunity tonight just to get a little input from members on what you think we should be focusing on, knowing A, what we've done in the past, or B, what you think about this issue, or C, how you think we should be working with the other school committees. We haven't approached them yet, because we certainly want to do this deliberately, transparently, and with your advice and input. That's my question I have for you tonight, and I don't know, Emily, if you have another one, but so I would just like Madam Chair to open it up to school committee members to see if they have any feelings or direction for us as we start this process, advice.
If I could just, I've seen this looked at once or twice in my tenure from elementary school committee through now. I think I may have shared with someone.
You should.
I did, okay. Previous surveys and information, it's aged, but this is what we saw last time. I would, fully encourage you to reach out to the other school committees, see if there's a member or so, and maybe even, I think last time it was looked at, the parent population was also invited to, within reason, a couple of parents from different age groups to participate, to give you a well-rounded working group. If anybody else has. I mean, certainly it has to be looked at in a joint district fashion. For no other reason, first in primary comes to my mind the bus contract, which, we always struggle with when we talk about this topic. But those are my 2 cents. I just wanted to make sure that I knew I had forwarded the aged information to someone in the past.
Sure.
To make the parent selection a little less arbitrary, I would suggest looking at parents who've already been duly elected to their school improvement council by their own school's population, because they are representatives of the parents of those schools.
Okay.
I just had a question, so, and maybe we could, whoever can speak to this, but is the intent of the school start time working group to change the school start time, or is the intent to get a feel for the district as to whether or not we want to change the time?
I mean, I would say there's a growing body of research that school start times are wildly inappropriate for the age groups to which they represent. So
Yeah, more of that piece, that's what I'm
without,
wondering.
I mean, it feels weird to go into it and to change it, but I mean, I think, in my opinion, we would be raising some awareness around why there's that disconnect and where we may see some pretty significant education gains if we look at research where places have done this in other schools, in middle and high school students, in terms of getting more sleep. So I think I would be going into it with an open lens, but in my opinion, I would hope that we would be looking at what possibilities are there, or what does the research show us, and why might we be inclined to reconsider kids getting on a bus at 6:55 in the morning
If not earlier.
when they're 13 years old.
That would be great, 6:55.
Or whatever time. Yes. My neighbor's 6:55. We're close to the school, so.
I think, I mean, just to answer your question from my perspective, Summer, I think that there's a lot of information out there that we should be evaluating already. And in addition to that, I think we need to be polling and surveying and looking at our own school community, not just the parents, but the staff as well. So I'm not going into it with any preconceived notion. I mean, it's, to Emily's point, the research is pretty overwhelming in some parts. But I think it would behoove us to bring that research as a working group back to the school committees, not necessarily in a biased fashion, but just to show what we found if people have looked at it. I mean, somehow the research is inherently biased a little bit anyhow because people who are looking at it are people who are interested in it. But we all know that. So I don't have any preconceived notions. I think it makes sense, just generally. But I wouldn't make a big decision like this based on it just makes sense.
So you make a good point too that I didn't think of when I was thinking more about like the community involvement is also part of your like duty as this working group would be to present to us like research that you found and you know, okay, all right, cool, that's all. I just wanted more clarification on what exactly you were bringing back to us and it wasn't just going to be a community survey because I know that it's almost like there are people that feel very passionate about this issue and I remember sitting through one of these cycles before. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to take a bit of work then to turn that all into some benefit cost analysis. You know, that is what's the benefit to doing it and what's the cost of doing it, not just financial cost. I mean, you know, to our educational goals and the impacts to our operations and, you know, all those things. So it's a pretty daunting task. But there are some roadmaps of other districts that have looked at this all across the country. So they might not be great roadmaps, but there's, I think, enough roadmaps out there that we can look at as well. Yeah. So, I mean, I have, just to Emily's point, I have my own personal feeling about it, but I am a scientist, so like I'm setting that aside, seeing what the research shows us.
I do have a question about, like, you know, we talked about maybe parents from the school improvement councils. How is it best to involve, like, faculty staff perspective in this? Because I know, like, Michaela's been talking about they've been having
You're going to have to go
discussions
through the association and have dialogue with them.
with the SLEA. Even as a working group?
You have to avoid a situation where it looks like you're direct dealing with members of the bargaining unit.
Okay.
Because the start and end times have an impact on the working conditions. And so we have to have a dialogue with them. So you can't bypass the association, go directly to the teachers.
No, and
that's true of surveys too.
Yeah. Okay.
So we have to be cognizant that we have a group that represents the teachers and we need to go through that group legally.
So Michaela talked a lot about like rethinking the schedule, and
I'm not saying you shouldn't do that, I'm just saying it's a process. So I think it's good to get information from parents, students, teachers, but for the teacher group, this process you need to follow legally.
Okay. Well, I think in addition to that, it's not always about the end point, it's about the journey. And I think, you know, you need to franchise people into the journey, even if you don't know what the outcome is going to be.
Thank you.
Alrighty then. Silver Lake Educational Association.
Hi, how are we all tonight? I'm Ashley Ferrara. I'm the high school vice president. John, similar to Michaela, is participating in the musical tonight. He's playing in the pit tonight. There's nothing really new to report, just to speak to Emily's previous discussion. Colin Gregory, the secretary, is on the schedule committee, so probably would be happy to chat with you about start time. Sorry,
Eager to.
I like to volunteer people a lot, so sorry, Colin. And to speak to Ryan's panorama survey, like I am part of that committee, and I think like we all agree and understand that like this year has been really tough after what last year was for students, teachers, families alike. And there's pressure to get back to the academics, right? So the good thing about the panorama survey is that it provides the social emotional feedback that we need that's possibly missing or hard to get, or feels like, you know, we have to focus on the academics even though we want to focus on that stuff. So I think we're excited as a faculty for that opportunity. And that's it. So continue, have a good day.
Thanks. Administrative review, we do, it's in January. I'll look it up on that calendar. I believe it's like the 15th.
Is it before the next school year?
It is.
The 13th?
January 13th,
Okay.
5 p.m.
Excellent. Thank you. CTE.
No meetings, just thank you for supporting the change in policy for admission. That was all we had to discuss.
Chairman's report correspondence. I have no correspondence I'm not aware of, other than I did receive one email from a parent subsequent to our letter. The parent stated that they were having their child or children vaccinated and just wanted to understand how to ensure that I checked the box, I got my child vaccinated, would be captured for the 80%, the reporting, etc. So I explained to her, I deferred her to the appropriate school nurse, thanked her for her email, thanked her for her decision to get the family vaccinated, and told her again that nobody has any of this information. Contact your school nurse, and she can give you more guidance on that. So that's the only piece of correspondence I have that you folks aren't aware of. Legislative agent.
So I don't know if you guys realize this, but the Speaker of the House and the Senate President are both former school committee members. About 33% of the state legislature right now are former school committee members. I bring that up because Senate President Spilka recently delivered a mental health bill, and it's Mental Health 2.0 because she previously passed a very groundbreaking mental health bill, actually with the help of Senator DiMacedo, the alum of Silver Lake. This current bill has not been passed yet. It is talking about trying to bring about 2,000 more mental health caregivers to the state. And one of the ways that she's looking at this is the state of Massachusetts, when it comes to certifications, is a little bit archaic. For example, teachers who go to college in other states like New Hampshire or Vermont, you would think it would be easy for them to get reciprocity with their credentials to teach here in Massachusetts, and it's not. You have to go through a laborious process, take the MTELs to get certified in Massachusetts. Similar process for mental health providers to come into the state. So this bill would address some of those issues to streamline the process. It would also create a state database of available beds for mental health treatments. Currently, there is no centralized database of availability for beds. Last month, Children's Hospital in Boston was reporting it was taking them on average 35 days to find an inpatient service for mental health crisis. And also, this bill would include provisions to make it harder for insurance companies to deny referrals for mental health care. Currently, mental health referrals receive rejections at a rate 70% higher than physical health ailments do. So I'm watching this move through very carefully. I have reached out to our state legislators to tell them I support this for the well-being of our students, knowing what they've been through in the past 2 years. $4 billion in federal funds have been finally approved. They're starting to unveil how those funds are going to be spent. A lot of people think they took too much time deciding how to spend these funds. I actually applaud the legislature for being deliberate and taking the time to analyze how to spend these one-time funds. Unfortunately, they did take out $100 million that could have been used for school infrastructure. Again, I have to applaud Chris for the work he's been doing with our SAFER organization, which is buildings and grounds, taking care of the physical plant of our buildings, working with the 3 towns to try and build consensus of how we're going to maintain these buildings in the coming years. It's an expensive venture. And unfortunately, these $100 million that the state cut out of its plan for the spending of the federal funds puts us in a very difficult position. That's following on the heels of the national budget taking out $100 billion that was specifically earmarked for aging school buildings and infrastructure for our schools in the United States here. So I am going to DC mid-January to meet with our delegation, and one of the first things I'm going to ask them to do is work to put those $100 billion back into a federal infrastructure bill to support our aging schools. Also to encourage continued support of the Perkins program for our CTE program, and ask them also to refile the fully fund IDEA Act. Currently, IDEA is only funded at 15%. Statutorily, we're supposed to fund it at 40%. This is kind of like circuit breaker on a federal level. It would bring to our 3 towns approximately $1 million more of federal funds annually to support our schooling, especially of our most needy students. If you have anything that you would like me to bring to the table when I speak with our legislators down in DC, I'd be more than happy to bring individual requests from any of you as well.
Thanks, Jason. I just had a question based of our ongoing strategy relative to the capital funds that are needed to support our schools. I know last year during town meetings we tried to open a trust, right? Did I get that right? Because it was a crazy...
We tried to open up a revolving
fund, stabilization fund, which would be a receptacle for funding to do things that we don't have to take out of E&D. So I'm just wondering, as a school committee, or is that the strategy that we're going to take again this spring with our towns in order to get that fund set up such that we can accept these types of monies?
So I'm going to pass this to Chris.
Okay, sorry, Chris.
Because Chris has been spearheading this this year for us.
If it's under
as the chair.
safer, that's fine. I just didn't know relative to that.
No, and I mean, the tone from the towns has changed tremendously this year, and I think it has a lot to do with the way that Chris has approached them and really broken down our needs. So if you want to jump in there, Chris.
So we're going to let Jason get the money, and then you're going to let us help us put it somewhere.
Spend it.
Right.
No, yeah.
Well, and spend it.
Yeah, I'll do it under
That's fine.
safer, that's fine.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Just brought that up to me again about the strategy on it.
Okay, negotiations. Are we having an executive session? We need to have a brief one after. Yeah, okay. PAC.
PAC is meeting tonight, so I don't have a report.
Oh, okay.
So overlapped with this meeting.
Revolving funds, no meeting.
Oh, did
Then this policy, I'm sorry. No meeting.
Are you on?
Safer, all yours.
Safer, wonderful. Safer was tonight. Y'all missed it. So back to Leslie Ann's question, Jason, with the stabilization fund. We met with the 3 towns back in November, and we kind of got a little more support on the stabilization fund. I think the general pushback from the towns in the spring was it was a little rushed.
Yeah.
And I think we knew that going into it, that we saw an opportunity, we saw a future need to open the account, let's get it done. We think it's simple, we've discussed it, but I hadn't really sort of
Socialized it.
gotten to everyone's buy-in. I think now we have much more buy-in to at least go forward with an opportunity to open a stabilization fund and not request funds, so that then in the future we can say, okay, here's why we need more funds. That's the groundwork that we're laying this year, saying, okay, tennis courts being the example, how do we address this? We thought about it last year, we did talk about it this year, put stabilization in place. Maybe next year we can start making requests of $50,000, $100,000 per year, just to kind of get something building as they see the stress and strain of the campus on that E&D. That E&D is not necessarily a perpetual fund, so to speak. We've been blessed with some revenue there, though. So tonight we went through version 1A, I'll call it, of the next year's capital plan, trying to see what we have for projects. We have a few new requests to add, and we have some things we were able to push forward. I don't think anything is really final here by any means, but the tennis courts was still kind of a question mark because we did a $10,000 Band-Aid work, patchwork, and we don't know how well it's going to survive the winter. That's just the frankness of it. So at some point, the remedy is a replacement as opposed to a resurfacing or anything because the cracks are just too darn deep. So that may end up as an article again this year because it's $340 grand is what our estimate was last December, and it doesn't look like it's going to fit into the capital plan. It's just too big. It would push us to spend more than I think we're comfortable with and be about 50% of that spend. Yeah.
I'm managing a $100 million construction project at work right now, and we're seeing a 0.5% escalation rate per month, which is about 6% a year, which is astronomical. So there is the pro of that if you don't do a construction project now, it could settle out. But the con is if you don't do a construction project, your escalation is going to be huge if you delay it too long. So I'm just bringing that more as a data point than anything. But it's not just a supply issue. It's more than that. So just FYI.
Thank you. The other sort of big topic of SAFER tonight was trying to figure out the next steps of the admin building. I think we've brought that to the table here many, many, many times. And we had some great conversations and thoughts. I think we just need to figure out if we're going to put in some sort of assessment study of what an admin team needs in terms of number of offices, number of cubicles, space, location, all that kind of stuff. Because I think last time what we did is we was trying to find a raw space for a generic office staff. I don't think it was really looking at what needs to happen in that space. So hopefully we can get something moving on that. And if so, we'll put a dollar amount placeholder in next year's capital plan to try and at least get that started, knowing it's a multi-year project on that front. So that was what we did. Next year's safe update.
Chris, did the discussion about air conditioning for the buildings go forward at all anywhere?
We've had conversations. We did not have it in the 60 minutes we had tonight. So no real updates since the Tri-Town meeting of trying to figure out how and what sort of ARPA funding would be available from the 3 towns. They're aware that it falls under that eligibility, so we can go to the 3 towns and request ARPA funds for the roof systems. I believe the total system cost between the 2 buildings is $1.5 million. And we, I'll call it tentatively or earmarked, have a couple $100,000 earmarked from Catherine Atra from the Massachusetts State. So she's got 210, I think, specifically for HVAC. So that means we need 1.3 from the towns and or capital plan and or debt or some other funding mechanism. Again, if we put $500,000 in our capital plan, we've really been spending in that $600,000 to $700,000 range. So a $500,000 number would be painful to absorb in one fell swoop. So we're hoping to figure that out, but I don't know if the towns have the